The first game that we have to talk about, the game that I am the most excited for, we have the number 8th ranked Arkansas Razorbacks taking on number 2 ranked Georgia. Both of these two teams are going into this game with a record of 4-0. And Georgia is a 18.5-point favorite. Now, this game is going to be played on ESPN with a 12 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. And a lot of Georgia fans and a lot of Arkansas fans are upset with the kickoff time because a lot of people, myself included, feel like this game should get a prime time slot. I feel like this game should personally be played at 8 p.m. Eastern time. It should be on ABC. It should be in prime time because this is a really exciting matchup. You have Arkansas, who is having a storybook season led by head coach Sam Pittman, and he somehow has brought Arkansas football back to relevance. And I don't know, for all of you guys who are watching this, for some of my younger viewers out there who may be my age, I'm 19 years old. A lot of my younger watchers out there may not know this, but Arkansas actually is one of the best programs historically in college football history. They have a lot of wins. This is one of the better football programs in college football, and yet they kind of have had a lot of down years. But then Sam Pittman comes, and he just brings this Arkansas Razorback football program up from the ashes, and they're having a Cinderella season. And I have somehow became a temporary Arkansas fan, not just because, Miami sucks, but I love rooting for the underdog, okay? And Arkansas fans, you guys have showed a lot of support to the channel, a lot of love to me, and I appreciate that, man. I didn't even know Arkansas had this big of a fan base, but this is definitely a game that I would describe as a David versus Goliath matchup, because you have Georgia, and Georgia, in many people's eyes, is the best team in America right now. Now, some people will say Alabama, but some people will say Georgia. And we saw what Georgia did to Vanderbilt. And I know it's Vanderbilt football, but the fact they were able to score over 30 points in just the first quarter alone, that's downright scary. Now, Kirby Smart is 11-6 versus top 10 teams. So he's pretty successful when it comes to these big time games. Meanwhile, you have Arkansas right now that has a lot of momentum. You got a big win against Texas a couple of weeks ago. Then you got a big win over Texas A&M last week. So Arkansas is riding into this game with a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum. And I guarantee you that Arkansas is going to come into this game prepared. They're going to be ready. They're not going to be afraid to take chances. They're not going to be afraid to, put caution to the wind, because this is an Arkansas football program right now that feels like they can beat any team in America, and rightfully so, because I don't think there's a hotter team in college football right now than Arkansas. And you can say, well, they beat Texas A&M or they beat Texas, but this is Georgia, and I understand that. But if you're a Georgia fan, I don't think you can just look at this matchup and scoff at it. Because one thing about this Arkansas football team, man, under Sam Pittman, not only are they good, but they fight. And they fight to the very end. This is a scrappy football team. This is a very well-coached football team. You have a really good offensive coordinator. You have a really good defensive coordinator. Sam Pittman has assembled a really good coaching staff down there in Arkansas. And on top of that, Sam Pittman was on Georgia's staff, and he came out and gave a lot of praise to Kirby Smart. He said if it wasn't for Kirby Smart, he never would be the head coach of Arkansas. So when you look at Arkansas, this team has a lot of experience. Remember, this is a team that returns 19 out of 22 starters from last year. On top of that, they returned their whole entire starting offensive line from the previous season, and they returned every single player but one on the defense. So this is a very experienced group, a very talented group. And my biggest my biggest thing that I'm so excited about in this game is going to be Arkansas's offensive line versus the defensive line of Georgia. Now, everybody's so fascinated with the wide receivers and how great the quarterback play is, and rightfully so. But me, I'm kind of an old-fashioned football fan. I love to see the battle that's being played in the trenches, and I don't think we're going to find a better matchup inside the trenches this weekend than what this Arkansas versus Georgia game is going to have. Arkansas has the best offensive line in the SEC this year. Yes, they have a better offensive line than Georgia, and yes, I'm saying that they have a better offensive line than Alabama. And when you look at Arkansas, they're going to be going against the best defensive line, not only in the SEC, but in college football. There are a lot of guys playing on this Georgia defensive line who are going to be playing on Sundays, who most likely could end up being first-round selections in next year's NFL draft and the next NFL drafts to come in the following years. So you're getting a really exciting battle in the trenches. And what I want to see is how successful is Arkansas going to be when it comes to running the football, because Arkansas has a pretty balanced attack. They can beat you through the air because they have a really great cast of wide receivers, but they also can do a lot of damage in the run game. They have like 3, 4, 5 20 running backs on this roster who they rotate in, who they can gash you with. And I'm, just being a little bit over dramatic with the 20 running backs, but you guys get the point. They have so many running backs on this team who they can rotate in and give them a lot of production. And you also got to take into account what quarterback KJ Jefferson is able to do. Not only is he pretty good throwing the football, but he's also pretty good running the football as well. And a lot of people have compared KJ Jefferson to Cam Newton, and I definitely understand the comparison because this guy is big, he's physical. When you think of a quarterback, you don't really think of a quarterback who you can run in between the tackles that much. You normally think of a quarterback who's going to run the football getting out to the edge, but KJ Jefferson is just this big, powerful, dual threat QB, and I'm really intrigued in seeing how does Kirby Smart and this Georgia coaching staff and this Georgia defense, how they're going to game plan and prep for KJ Jefferson, because essentially KJ Jefferson up to this point is the most talented QB that Georgia has faced up to this point in the season. Now, I know they faced DJ Uiagalelei week 1, but he's not KJ Jefferson. He can run, don't get me wrong, but he's not the runner that KJ Jefferson is when he has the football. So I really want to see how his dual threat ability is going to impact this game, because even if Arkansas's offensive line struggles in this game, you still have to take into account that you're not going to have a sitting duck back there at quarterback. You're going to have a guy who, when things break down, he's going to be able to pick up yardage and a lot of yardage, and on top of that, he's going to be able to extend plays to give his wide receivers extra time to get open. So if you're a Georgia fan, you're not facing a quarterback that's just a strictly pocket passer. Like, this guy is an elite athlete, and if he gets in open field, then you better watch out, because he's going to cause a lot of damage. Now, the Georgia pass defense is really suffocating this year. They're like a boa constrictor. They're just squeezing the opposing teams they play, and they don't really have any room to throw the football against this Georgia secondary. This Georgia secondary is probably the best that you will find in college football. They're second in college football in passing yards per game allowed with 115, and they're allowing a whopping 4.6 yards per pass attempt. Do you guys know how impressive that is? I don't care who you played. In this day and age of college football, with the no-huddle offense and the spread offenses, when you have a lot of teams lined up 4 or 5 wide, the majority of times they snap the football, that's very impressive that you're allowing less than 6 passing yards per attempt. That's impressive. I don't care who you play. You got to give a lot of kudos to Georgia for that. And that's also because not only do they have a good secondary, but they also have a really good front seven that can get after you. So, for Arkansas, how effective is this rushing attack going to be against Georgia's run defense? Now, Georgia's run defense over the last couple of years has always been really good. Now, I was looking at statistics. The statistics don't really reflect how good Georgia is against the run. Georgia not only has one of the best pass defenses, but they have one of the best run defenses in the nation as well. I don't give a damn about what the stats say. Like, this defense for Georgia is one of the best defenses that I've seen in a very long time. So when you look at Arkansas, Arkansas also has a pretty good defense. Now, their defense isn't as good as Georgia's defense, but it's pretty doggone good in their own right, led by defensive coordinator Barry Odom. Now, Georgia is going to be tested, because the last time we saw Georgia match up against a really good defense was week 1 against Clemson, and we all saw how that game went. Okay, so for Georgia, how much has the offense improved from the last time you played Clemson up to this point? Now, you've been racking it up on Vanderbilt and a bunch of these other schools, but you haven't really played a school like Arkansas yet. So I'm not discrediting what they did against Clemson. I'm not doing that, okay? All I'm saying is Arkansas is not Vanderbilt. Arkansas has a really good defense, a really good defensive coordinator. They have a really good safety who's probably going to end up being a second round, late first round pick whenever he declares for the draft. You have a pretty good defensive line. Like, this Arkansas defense has a lot of talent. But this is where my concern lies with Arkansas, because I definitely feel like Arkansas has the talent to pull off the upset against Georgia. But where a lot of people's question lies with Arkansas is, does Arkansas have the depth up front? Because Georgia, not only do they have a lot of great players who are starters up front, but they also have a lot of guys who they can rotate in if they have to keep guys fresh. Now, Arkansas does have depth, but they don't have Georgia depth. You get what I'm saying? I'm not saying that Arkansas doesn't have any depth. I'm saying, does Arkansas have the depth that Georgia has? When the big guys get tired and they get gassed, are you going to have guys who you can rotate in and keep fresh? That's the question. Because Georgia is probably going to be the best team that Arkansas plays up front all year, including Alabama. So if you're Arkansas, are you going to be able to rotate your big guys in and keep those guys fresh when this game gets into the fourth quarter? Because if you're an Arkansas fan, you have a lot of confidence that this game is going to be competitive. You have a lot of confidence that this game could come down to one possession. Well, if this game is going to get down to the fourth quarter, you're going to have to make sure that you have depth to make sure that your guys can go all out in the fourth quarter, because it doesn't matter if you're able to hang around to the fourth quarter if your guys end up going in there with 25% of the game left and those guys are all on E. They're all on empty and they're out of gas. So if you're Arkansas, are you going to be able to not only make sure that you can stay in this game until the fourth quarter, but are you going to have enough depth to make sure that you can keep guys fresh when we finally get into the final stretch of this game? Because I feel like Arkansas is good enough to keep this game competitive. I just don't know if they have the depth that when guys finally get down to the fourth quarter and we're down in the last 6 minutes, are guys going to have their hands on their hips? Are guys going to be running out of breath? That's where my question lies with Arkansas, because we know Georgia has that depth, and I'm not saying Arkansas doesn't have that depth, but does Arkansas have the talent of depth that Georgia has? That's where my concern lies with this game. Now, for Georgia, the last time they faced a great defense, you faced Clemson, and it wasn't really all that impressive, okay? The run game couldn't really get going. Nothing really couldn't get going. So when I look at Georgia, you look at Arkansas's corners. Arkansas's corners, they're not bad, but, I definitely feel like that's a matchup that Georgia could exploit in that game. But the thing is, Arkansas has a really good pass rush, and you got to also take into account that Arkansas normally is rolling with 3 defensive linemen. So if they're rushing 3, that means that you have a lot of field that you could beat them underneath. So when I look at Arkansas and I look at their scheme, I'm going to see what offensive coordinator Todd Monken for Georgia has cooked up going against Barry Odom. I think that's going to be a very essential matchup that a lot of people probably aren't going to talk about. But you look at Tom Monken, who's calling the plays for Georgia, you look at what he's going to be doing against Arkansas defensive coordinator Barry Odom. I think that's going to be a very intriguing chess match, because when you look at Arkansas, okay, I think that they have some vulnerabilities in their defense that you can beat them underneath. I think Arkansas is a team that isn't going to allow you to beat them over the top, but you definitely can do some damage underneath. And we kind of saw Texas have a little bit of success with that. So if you're able to give JT Daniels enough time, he's going to destroy Arkansas underneath. So I'm really intrigued in seeing how the Georgia approaches to attacking this Arkansas defense. And also, are you going to have success running the football against Arkansas? Because Arkansas's run defense was really good against Texas A&M. I know Isaiah Spiller had a pretty good day stats-wise, but if you take out that big run that he had, Texas A&M, he really only had like 20-something rushing yards outside of that big run that he was able to break off. So you're looking at an Arkansas defense that is really good against the run, but I do feel like this defense does have some vulnerabilities in their scheme that you could definitely take up a lot of yards underneath. So for me personally, I think for Arkansas to win this game, you have to make sure that you don't turn the football over, and you got to make sure that you're disciplined. And Arkansas has done a pretty good job at that to this point. But when you're facing a team like Georgia, your margin for error is incredibly small. Like, I don't really think that Arkansas can afford to have one turnover and still expect to win this game. If they're going to win this game, they're going to have to win the turnover margin. And on top of that, I think that they're going to have to make sure that they never find themselves down more than 10 points in this game. Because I feel like if Arkansas gets down by multiple possessions at any point in this game, then I think the momentum drastically tilts. On top of that, you also got to look at the factor that they're going to be on the road in Athens, Georgia, which is going to be a hostile road environment. So if they get down early, that crowd is going to be rolling. So for Arkansas, I really think that it's really important that they're able to keep this at minimum at a 10-point game. And if you go into the fourth quarter only down 10, I think that's somewhat of a win for Arkansas, because then you still put yourself in position to still have a really good shot at winning this game. So I look at KJ Jefferson. Now, KJ Jefferson was kind of banged up in last week's win versus Texas A&M. So I wonder if he's going to be a full strength. Are we going to see a KJ Jefferson that is at 100%, or is he going to be at 85, 90%? Because if Arkansas is going to win this game, they're going to need all of KJ Jefferson and then some if they're going to be able to pull off this upset. So for me, I mean, like, I really want Arkansas to win this game, man. But I'm going to have to take Georgia. And, you know, like, I really like Arkansas a lot, man. Like, I'm rooting for Arkansas. I'm like an Arkansas fan this year, man. Like, I want to see Arkansas win this game so bad, man. But every time a school like Minnesota ends up facing a big boy, they always kind of let me down, man. And I know Arkansas is capable of winning this game, but I'm going to have to side with Georgia, because at the end of the day, man, when we get down to the fourth quarter and ankles get weak and, you know, the breathing gets heavy, I don't really know if Arkansas is going to have that depth that is going to be needed when you're facing a school like Georgia that has a lot of guys who are really talented. I know Arkansas starters are talented. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, are your backups, is your depth just as talented as your starters? That's the question. I don't really know. So I'm going to have to take Georgia. I think this game is going to be close. I think this is a game that Arkansas could take Georgia into the fourth quarter. But I think we get down to the final stretch. We get down to the last 8 minutes. And that's where I think Arkansas kind of runs out of gas. And that's where I think we see Georgia start to take over this game. So I'm rolling with Georgia to get the victory. 24-20 is going to be my final score prediction in this game. I'm rolling with Georgia, but I'm rooting for Arkansas to pull off the upset.